الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا، وأصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا، وأصلح لنا آخرتنا التي إليها معادنا، واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر. Alhamdulillah, it's definitely a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah has guided us to be here to remember Him. Allah has given us the strength to be here to remember Him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the want and the urge to seek His knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us more knowledge, as the Prophet ﷺ was ordered to say, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, and say, O Allah, or O my Lord, give me more knowledge. So what hadith are we at now? If you don't mind reading it, sorry.
عن أبي ذر رضي الله عنه أن ناسا من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قالوا للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
So we did this hadith.
We did?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe
it's around 26, I think.
27?
Oh, that was 26?
That was 25th.
So 26.
26 is each day is عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كل سلامة من الناس عليه صدقة كل يوم تطلع فيه الشمس تعدل بين اثنين صدقة وتعين الرجل في دابته فتحمله عليها أو ترفع له عليها متاعه صدقة والكلمة الطيبة صدقة وبكل خطوة تمشيها إلى الصلاة صدقة وتميت الذي أذى عن الطريق صدقة. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
Okay. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he narrated this hadith at the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He says, كل سلامة من الناس عليه صدقة. As forgot to mention, Imam nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he says that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, كل سلامة من الناس عليه صدقة. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he says that every sulama, which is basically your joints, right? So every joint in your body deserves sadaqah. Every joint in your body deserves sadaqah. Now, I'm gonna geek out in the engineering way a little bit, if you guys don't mind. My engineering is gonna come out here. So, the thing about joints that is extremely incredible, like for example, our hand, right? So, the way that our hands move, if I remember correctly, it's like 14 degrees of freedom. So there's something in engineering we call a degree of freedom. So like if you move this way and this way, right? So this way is a degree of freedom, this way is another degree of freedom, right? So then you have also this way. So that's 3, right? Then you have this way, and you have this way, and you have this way, right? Well, your hand has, I believe, 14, if I remember correctly, right? So with the robots that they have designed, the most degrees of freedom that they were able to achieve, as far as I remember,
7 or 8.
I think it was
joints.
It was a 7?
27.
27 joints or degrees of freedom?
Joints, yeah. 27 joints and 27 bones.
No.
And there are 34 muscles.
So I'm talking about the degrees of freedom, though.
Oh, degree of freedom. I'm so sorry. I didn't.
It's okay. So, and I think there's 14 degrees of freedom in your hand, and how it moves, right? But they were able, when they created a robot, the most degrees of freedom they were able to create, I think, is 10.
Yes.
I think, right? But nonetheless, it's less than 14, right? So, as much technology that we've gotten to, after all of these years, the most we've been able to make up is 10, right? So, I mean, if you think about your arm now, and then you include your hand, I don't even remember how many degrees of freedom that is, because you have your shoulder, you have your elbow, and then you have your wrist, and then all of your fingers, right? So that's exponentially more, right? So there's no way that we can quantify the blessings that we have in our joints. So the Prophet ﷺ said that for every joint in our body, it deserves sadaqah every day. كل سلامة من الناس عليه صدقة. Why? Because we have to thank Allah for it, right? I mean, think about people who lose joints or lose, what do you call it? Function in arms or legs or their neck, or the list goes on, right? Imagine, if your joints aren't working well in your legs, you can't walk, right? Even if you still have the legs and the legs can move, but you just can't move your joints. You can't walk. So subhanallah, the blessings that we have within our joints, the Prophet ﷺ said, it deserves sadaqah every day. To thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. Kullu sulama, that for every joint, and I think it's like 360 joints that we have, right?
Yeah.
كل يوم تطلع فيه الشمس, meaning every day that the sun rises, all of our joints deserve sadaqah. So think about it. If every joint deserves sadaqah, then we need to be giving 360 sadaqah every day. 360 sadaqah every day, right? So then the Prophet ﷺ, he told us how do we do this sadaqah. He said, تعدل بين اثنين صدقة. Right? Is that the first one? تعدل بين اثنين صدقة, right? To reconcile between two different people is sadaqah, right? So one, this shows that this is a good deed to actually reconcile between people. So this is something that we have to put effort into, as opposed to the mentality of, yeah, they have problems, but whatever, it's not my problem, right? Rather, there's a lot of blessings in reconciling between two Muslims. Whenever two Muslims have issues between them, whether it be husband and wife, whether it be siblings, whether it be parent and child, whether it be whoever it might be, whether family or even non-family, right? Or even non-family members. So everyone who, whenever there is problems between Muslims, our job is, as fellow Muslims, is to reconcile between them. تعدل بين اثنين صدقة وتعين الرجل.
Does it say about Muslims? Is it specifically Muslims in this sentence?
That's a good question. So it doesn't specify so he says تعدل بين اثنين, to reconcile between two people, right? So the question is it for Muslims and non-Muslims? I don't know the answer to that. I have to I don't know. وتعين الرجل في دابته فتحمله عليها أو تحمل له عليها متاعه صدقة, right? And then to help someone, or he mentions a man here, but this applies to men and women, obviously. So, like, back in the day, a ride meant getting on a camel, getting on a horse, getting on donkey. So you can imagine an old person would have a hard time getting on it. So he says the Prophet ﷺ is saying to help that person. It doesn't necessarily have to be an old person. Obviously, it can be someone who's sick, someone who's disabled or whatever. So helping them get on their ride is a sadaqah. Or helping them get their stuff onto the ride is also sadaqah. Right? Now, for this one, I am sure that this applies to non-Muslims and Muslims. Right? So, like for example, you see someone that's struggling putting their groceries in their car. Right? You get rewarded for helping that person put their groceries in their car, for example, or getting their groceries into the house. For example, a neighbor helping, especially this is even double the blessing because not only are you helping someone, you're also helping your neighbor. And we talked about how important it is to be good to your neighbor. So therefore, the reward is multiplied here. So whenever you're helping someone with their things or them personally get onto their ride, right, it is sadaqah. Now understand also, all these that the Prophet ﷺ is talking about are examples. It does not mean that you should limit it to these things. Because also in the previous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he talked about sadaqah. Right? It was also the topic of sadaqah, right? So in that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was asked about rich people, how they got all the good deeds. They ran away with everything because they fast like they fast. So some poor people came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, the rich people ran away with all of the good deeds. They fast like we fast. They pray like we pray. But then they give away sadaqah and we don't have any money to give. Right? So then the Prophet ﷺ said, didn't Allah give you the ability to give sadaqah? Right? So then he said, وَبِكُلِّ تَكْبِيرَةٍ صَدَقَةٍ وَبِكُلِّ تَهْلِيلَةٍ صَدَقَةٍ. To say Allahu Akbar is sadaqah. To say La ilaha illallah is sadaqah. To say Alhamdulillah is sadaqah. Right? Right? وَأَمْرٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ صَدَقَةً. And to enjoin good is sadaqah. And to forbid evil is sadaqah. Right? So you talked about all those different things as sadaqah. And now in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ continues with different things as sadaqah. So again, understand, in both of these ahadith, it is not a limiting of this is sadaqah and only this is sadaqah, but rather it is just mentioning some doors of good because the doors of good are endless. The doors of good are endless. And this is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has given us so many ways to do good, because you might have this person, it's easy for him to pray. Right? It's easy for him to make salah. So his door of good, he does a lot of salah. This person, is easy for him to fast. So his door of good is fasting a lot. Right? And this sister, it's easy for her to give sadaqah. So her door of good is sadaqah. Now it doesn't mean that you should, if your door of good, if your thing that you excel in is one thing, that you should limit it to that thing. Rather, what you should do is do a lot of the thing that you're good at. Do a lot of the thing that's easy for you, but then also try to do everything else. Because variety is very important, but specializing is most important. If that makes sense. So when it comes to good deeds, it's all about whatever Allah blesses you to do. Your good deed is dependent on what Allah has given you. It's not about, I did this, I'm strong, so I did this good deed of lifting something. Or I'm rich, so I did this good deed of giving money. I'm brave, so I did this good deed in fighting in jihad. Or whatever it is that I have, it has nothing to do with me, but rather it has something to do with what Allah gave me. Because it's not just the ability. Because there are people who are strong and who don't do anything good. There are people who are brave and do nothing good. There are people who are rich and do nothing good. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave us the opportunity. He gave us the strength to do it, and He gave us the willingness to do it, the want to do it. All of these things are from Allah. And the fact also that you followed through and you went through it and that you were able to actually do it is also a blessing from Allah, because now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is providing everything else that's needed in order for you to do it. All the other factors. Right? So therefore, it's important to understand that doing good is from Allah. So because it's from Allah, I have to do as much as possible of the thing that's easy. As much as I possibly can of the thing that's easy for me. And again, everybody has a different ease, right?
An hour coming.
So everyone has a different ease, right? For some people is praying, some people is fasting, some people so on and so forth. So it's important to excel in the thing that's easy, and then start to do other things little by little, adding this and adding that. And then now the question is, how do you know how much you add and when should you add? Okay, so let's say, for example, person A, he prays 2 rak'ahs every day after Fajr. This is his extra good deeds that he does. He does his 5 salawat. He does his fasting in Ramadan. He does, his 5 pillars. He does that. But now he wants to add something where he's adding 2 rak'ahs before Fajr every day. This is where he is. When does he know that he should add 2 more rak'ahs? Or when does he know that he should start to give sadaqah? Maybe give $1 a month, right? When does he know when he gets to that next level? Okay? So the first thing is there has to be a mentality. Okay? That mentality is that whatever it is that you're doing, that you never stop until you die. Until Allah takes your soul. So if I pray 2 rak'ahs for Fajr, before Fajr, and I say I'm going to do this. This is now, okay, let me take a step back. There is 2 types of good deeds. A good deed that is my normal daily thing, and then a good deed I just feel it and I'm just going to do a good deed. Right? Let's say, for example, I'm a rich person and I see something where it's an extreme need. So let's say, for example, the masjid is really needing a bigger parking lot. So I'm a rich person. I just say, here, put the money down, build the parking lot. I'm feeling really generous. And I give that, right? But that's a one-time thing. That's a good deed, and it's a very good thing to do that. Because Allah blessed me in that moment to want to give it. He blessed me with the opportunity to give it and everything around it. So therefore, give it. Bismillah. Does that make sense? Then there is the type of good deeds. I'm still rich, right? Where I'm giving a portion of my money every month that's coming in every month. So let's say I call it, 2%. Or let's say 3%, so that way it's higher than the zakat amount, which is 2.5%. So let's say I'm giving 3% every month out of the money that's coming in. And this is my consistent good deed. Right? And this good deed, I don't stop it until I die. So again, you look at good deeds from 2 types. One is, it's a one-time thing. And then another is consistent, I don't stop it until I die, as if it's an obligation. So I take that 3% and I see it as an obligation. And if I miss it, I feel the same way as if I missed salah. If I missed that 3%, because it's an obligation within me. Okay? So now, again, now we have these two types of good deeds, a one time and a consistent. The consistent, it should be until you die. Now the question is, when do you add onto your consistent good deed? When do you add onto your consistent good deed? The answer is, again, when Allah makes it easy and gives you the opportunity, okay, to add on to that consistent good deed. But then someone may ask, how about where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ya Yahya, khudhi al-kitaba biquwwa. Oh Yahya, the Prophet Yahya alayhi salatu wasalam, take the book with might. Like, take it hard. Meaning, like, work hard to get the book. Well, what about that? No. Okay, so when I say when Allah makes it easy for you, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't work for it. Okay? So let me kind of give you the most important thing for a person that's trying to increase in good deeds is to understand who he is or she is. Right? So if I am a person that is making 2 rak'ahs for Fajr and this is my good deeds, okay? The question is, when do I add 2 rak'ahs for Dhuhr? Okay? So, I can be the type of person that, I like to break through barriers. I like to overachieve. So, and I'm not afraid to fail. So what I do is I make 2 rak'ahs before Dhuhr. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about this person that I just made up, right? So I make 2 rak'ahs before Dhuhr, right? But knowing that, yeah, if I'm feeling lazy, I don't have to do it. But my 2 before Fajr, that's almost just as important as my Fajr itself, right? Okay, so now the 2 before Dhuhr, I just do it as much as I can. So I try. Some days I fail, some days I don't. So maybe I might have a milestone that I say, if I do it consistently for 30 days, now it's a part of my obligation. Maybe that might be a way to do it, right? And the reason that is important to do is because understanding that whatever good deed that you do is because Allah blessed you to do it, is because it's a mercy from Allah on you, then you are trying to tell Allah, Ya Allah, I'm worthy of this, so please give it to me. Or Ya Allah, give it, maybe not that I'm worthy of it, but Ya Allah, give this to me because I want it. I want the good, so Ya Allah, bring it to me. Even though it's difficult for me in my life, I want it. Right? So then maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you eventually to see the good in it. Because there are certain things that we do in our life. They may be difficult and they may be time intensive, but we don't think twice about it and we just do it. It's just, And for every person, it's something different. It could be, for example, washing dishes. It could be, for example, cleaning up a specific room. It could be cleaning your car. It could be, the list goes on, right? There are things that we do in our lives, we don't really think about it. But it's not like you enjoy it. It's just, So we know that we could do things, whether we enjoy it or not, right? It's just a matter of how do we get to that point where we see that good deed as something that I need and that I need to be doing it? So it's more so a mentality change than it is I'm working hard. Because the hard work is really, it's not really all that hard. Because if you think about it, we make 17 rak'ahs a day between Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha, right? We make 17 rak'ahs a day. Like, it's normal. We don't feel it. But if you talk to a non-Muslim and you tell him I pray 5 times a day, he's like, oh my God, how do you do that? Or you tell a non-Muslim I fast in Ramadan, they're like, oh man, there's no way in this world I could do that. The reason that is because they see it to be something really big because they don't see the significance of it. If you saw the significance in it, and Allah blessed you to be in that environment, it will be easy, right? And then we hear stories about scholars and some of the companions or the companions in general, and the Prophet ﷺ, we hear stories about how they used to worship Allah, and we'd be like, that's not possible. Kind of similar to how the kuffar look at us and look at what we do in just salah and fasting. They're like, that's not possible. We look the same at the companions and how the Prophet ﷺ used to do their ibadah, and we would say, oh yeah, that's not possible. Right? Like, for example, one thing, like, subhanallah, this story, it's amazing to me every time I think about it. There's this one sheikh in Saudi Arabia. He passed away, may Allah have mercy on him, like 20 something years ago. But his student was telling me this story, and he said, so my teacher, Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, his name is, may Allah have mercy on him, went to his teacher, Sheikh Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti, may Allah have mercy on him as well. He died in the 70s. But Sheikh Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti was considered one of the most knowledgeable people in this century, in this past century, right? So he went to him and he said, Ya Sheikh, he said, I've been reading these stories of people in the past, scholars, companions, where they would pray in one night, one rak'ah, and they would read the whole Quran in one rak'ah. So he said, I heard so many stories of people doing it. He was like, yeah, Shaykh, that's not possible. He said, really? It's not. He said, no, it's not possible. He said, come to my house after Isha, pray next to my house, and then come to me. So him and his best friend, they go and they pray at the masjid next to his house. So after they finish praying, they go to his house, they knock on the door. He opens the door, the sheikh opens the door. He faces the wall and says, Allahu Akbar. So they just pray right behind him. So then he's like, Alif, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Alif Lam Mim. And then he said, Wallahi. He said, when he said, Min al-jinnati wan nas, we heard the adhan for Fajr. So he said, okay. I understand now. So the thing is, this ibadah, when it comes to this worship, we're dealing with the one who created the heavens and the earth. We're dealing with the one who created time. The one who created everything in between. So we can't question anything about it. It's, in order for us to increase, he has to give it to us. But we have to want it. We have to, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alif Lam Mim, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. He says that do the people think that they're going to be left alone when they say, we believe, we're believers, and then they're not going to be tested. Meaning, when you say, I believe, the tests will come. The difficulties will come. So when you go into a good deed, I say, I'm going to do 2 rak'ahs before dhuhr, I'm going to get tested. Because now I need to show, do I really want these 2 rak'ahs or no? Are these 2 rak'ahs something that I want, meaning the blessings of it? Do I want that in my life or no? Right? So when we approach good deeds, we have to approach them in a way that we're trying to receive Allah's blessings, Allah's bounty, Allah's goodness. We want to get that, and therefore we approach the good deeds in that way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in good deeds and knowledge. So he said, so the Prophet ﷺ says, and then what is after فَتَحْمِلُ عَلَيْهَا صَدَقَةً وَتُمِيطُ الْأَذَى عَنِ الطَّرِيقِ صَدَقَةً وَالْكَلِمَةُ الطَّيِّبَةُ صَدَقَةً. And then to say something good, the word he used, طَيِّبَة, the word that is طَيِّبَة is صَدَقَة. The word that is طَيِّبَة is صَدَقَة. طَيِّبَة, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that we talked about, إِنَّ اللَّهَ طَيِّبٌ لَا يَقْبَلُ إِلَّا طَيِّبًا. That Allah is طيب and He only accepts طيب. Now, طيب basically means goodness. It basically means goodness. But it's difficult to completely explain that into English because طيب is more so an attribute here, right? So a good word, understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, al-khabithatu lil-khabithin, right? So the most common way to explain this ayah is that the bad women are for the bad men, and then the bad men are for the bad women, and then the good women are for the good men, and then the good men are for the good women, right? الخبيثات للخبيثين والخبيثون للخبيثات والطيبات للطيبين والطيبون للطيبات. But some scholars say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't specifically use the word men or women here, but rather He used the female bad things or the feminine, because in English we don't have like masculine and feminine are only for thinking beings, right? Or no, for mammals. What is it? Masculine and feminine is for who? Huh?
Animate creatures, not inanimate objects.
Like that seems.
Okay,
Living.
animate creatures. Okay, so I'm learning some English.
You forget it in Tunisian.
So the masculine things are for the feminine things, but in Arabic, everything is masculine and feminine. There is no it. There's no such thing as it in Arabic. It's either masculine or feminine. Does that make sense? So some scholars say that it's better that we take this ayah with the wide meaning, that it's referring to everything bad goes with everything bad. So the bad things go with the bad things, and the good things go with the good things, right? And from those bad things are words. Bad people say bad words, and good people say good words, right? And that's why here the Prophet ﷺ, he says, وَالْكَلِمَةُ الطَّيِّبَةُ صَدَقَةٌ. And saying good words, or words that are tayyib, words that, because understand, good words don't just mean words that are not curse words, right? It also means words that are beneficial, words that are helpful, words that, words that are beneficial and helpful, right? That's what al-tayyib, al-kalimatu al-tayyiba means. And that is sadaqah, right? And then what's the next one?
وبكل خطوة تمشيها إلى الصلاة.
We didn't miss one?
Did we miss أو ترفع له عليها
متاع وصدقة, I said that one.
والكلمة الطيبة صدقة.
Okay. وكل خطوة تمشيها إلى الصلاة صدقة. And then with every step that you take to salah, I had a sheikh, he said, and with every tire rotation is sadaqah towards salah. And every tire rotation is sadaqah. But with every step that you take towards the masjid is sadaqah, right? There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that whenever someone goes to the masjid, with one step, he's getting a blessing, and the other step, he's getting sins taken away. And that when you get to the masjid, that you are in salah as long as salah is stopping you from leaving. You are in salah as long as salah is stopping you from leaving. For example, you go to the masjid for Maghrib, then you stay until Isha, it's as if you prayed the entire time. How amazing is that? So the rewards or the blessings or the things that we can get in good deeds are endless. There's just so many ways that we can get good deeds. وَتُمِيطُ الْأَذَى عَنِ الطَّرِيقِ صَدَقَةً, right? That's the next one. And then to remove something that is harmful from the way, the pathway, is also sadaqah. Now understand the pathway. Let's mention the pathway of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, obviously it's not like we have it today. They didn't have paved roads. They didn't have paved sidewalks, so on and so forth. So what was a pathway back then? A pathway back then was something that most people walked on, so therefore became more walkable than the other ways, right? Like if we go out and we walk on this grass, we're going to feel like stuff happening like this, feeling weird, as opposed to, let's say, for example, a soccer field where it's pretty flat, right? The grass out here might have a lot of movements up and down, where a soccer field or a football field is pretty flat, right? Because that field has been stomped on enough where it has become flat. Does that make sense? Or they made it flat that way. I'm not sure, whatever they did, but nonetheless, a path that is put there, or that is sort of human made, is the pathway. So understand, basically anything that people pass through, or animals pass through, or anything that is continuously passed through, if you move something that is harmful for the people that are passing through it, or the animals, or whatever is passing through it, then this is sadaqah, right? So the normal road, you see something in the road that could be harmful, garbage can, a big rock, it could be a small rock, because imagine, like, also like in a sidewalk, imagine a lot of people that go out and they run, and if there's a rock like this size, right, it could mess up their ankle if they step on it and they don't see it, right? So something that seems mundane, right, but this is sadaqah, just to remove it from the pathway, right? And then another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that iman is many levels, right? And we talked about iman such that iman is the action of the heart. Right? Because when we talked about the hadith of Jibreel, we talked about Islam and iman, where Islam is the physical actions. Right? The shahada is a physical action, you say that. Salah is a physical action, we do that. Right? Zakat is also a physical action. Fasting is a physical action. Nowadays, zakat doesn't have to be physical because, because you got online and so many things that are, but, nonetheless, it's a physical action, right? And then fasting, physical action, and Hajj is a physical action, right? But then all the 6 pillars of Iman, they're not physical. They're all within the heart. To believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth, right? Well, the Prophet ﷺ said there are many levels to Iman, right? And then he said, and the lowest level is to remove something from the pathway. The lowest level is to remove something from the pathway. So if Iman is a heart action, how is removing something from the pathway Iman? Isn't that something physical? Well, Iman is an action of the heart. So how is removing something from the pathway, and this is the lowest level of Iman, how is that a heart action? Like, what made you move it? Why did you move it?
Because of a good deed. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the ability to move it.
Yes, Allah gave you the ability, but what was the thinking behind it to remove it? Like, okay.
No, to help someone.
Yes, because you're helping someone. Like the person who was running and they broke their ankle on a little rock. Right? So you're worried about people. And this is a part of Iman, that you're protecting people. You don't want people to be harmed. So this is a part of Iman. And this is the lowest level of Iman. So that love for people is the lowest level of Iman. Meaning, like, everybody has to have that. Concern for people. Care for people, yes. So everyone should have that. And this is the lowest level of Iman. Okay? And then what's the next one? Is that it? That was the last one?
Yeah.
Okay. Bukhari and Muslim. Any questions on that hadith? One thing, تفضل, yeah.
If you who have intention to like praying 2 rak'ah before Fajr and you didn't make it, it's possible to pray after Fajr? If it's possible?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah. So for those 2 rak'ahs, because the scholars, they say that those 2 rak'ahs are sunnah mu'akkada. They say to make it up if you miss it. Yes. So yeah, and making it up can be right after Fajr.
You mean talking about the sunnah
Of Fajr,
or
yes.
Fajr prayer? Okay.
Which is before Fajr.
You're talking about the one before
Yeah.
the hadith?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about tahajjud.
Before Fajr.
Before
Before Fajr.
Fajr, okay, that's sunnah.
Okay. So does that make sense?
Also,
Go ahead.
other questions about Salah. It's I don't know what's the hadith exactly, but I remember I heard like there's a hadith talking about أفضل المال that's spending on your family, that's the صدقة, right? So أفضل الصدقة اللي هو تقريبا ما متذكر الحديث.
Yeah, there is a hadith, الأقربون أولى بالمعروف. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, the people that are closest to you deserve or are more deserving of good. Are more deserving of good. And there's quite a few hadith on this issue. And another hadith is the wife of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhuma. She came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that I have money that I want to give in sadaqah. And she said that Abdullah told me, Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, that it's best that, right? Because they're in need. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, and they were in need, right? She said, but I want to give sadaqah, so to her it made sense to give it outside, right? So the Prophet ﷺ said, Abdullah's right. It's best that you give it to your family, right? And now that's sadaqah for her because it's not an obligation on her to take care of the family. The obligation is on him. So when she gives to Abdullah bin Mas'ud, that's sadaqah for her. Does that make sense? For her husband. Well, yeah. So yeah, family members are the ones who deserve sadaqah the most. No, the ones who deserve good the most. So whether that's sadaqah or, like another thing, subhanallah, a lot of people tend to do, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and forgive us, where we tend to be on our best behavior outside and then our worst behavior inside, right? But that's the opposite. It's supposed to be that we're on our best behavior inside. I mean, obviously we're good behavior outside, but we should be better inside. This is how the Prophet ﷺ was. He was best with his family, more than he was outside, right? So it's important that the good that we do is done at home first, right? And then we want to do good outside. One other thing that I wanted to mention, it's very important in understanding this deen to understand the history of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, why is that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He sent the Prophet ﷺ, He sent with him the Quran. And this Quran, it takes a snapshot in time of the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So what do I mean that it takes a snapshot? It takes a snapshot language-wise. It is the language of that time. Okay? And language has a unique thing that it carries a culture. Right? Today, you have Arab countries. And if you go from country to country, you will see, and even not just country to country, within that country, you go from the east side to the west side, from the north side to the south side, everybody speaks different. They sound different. Why? Because the cultures are different. Excuse me, let me see. I think maybe it's the reverse, I'm not sure. But the culture is in the language. The language and the culture, they go together. And we know this because most of us probably speak a different language. So we know that sometimes when you translate something, it doesn't make sense. When you go this way or you go that way. Like say we're going from Arabic to English. When I translate it, doesn't make sense. Or if I go from English to Arabic, it doesn't make sense. Or even like somebody who's in one country, let's say Morocco, he might have an Arabic saying that he says in Morocco. Compared to somebody in another country, Sudan, they have an Arabic saying. There's no comparison. Like they don't understand each other when they say the Arabic saying, because that Arabic saying is part of their culture. The Arabic saying is part of their culture. Does that make sense? So in order for us to understand the Quran, we have to understand the culture of the Prophet ﷺ, their time, right? And that's why it's important to understand the history of the Prophet ﷺ. One other aspect to this is that also with the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet ﷺ, and He says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ إِسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That in the Prophet ﷺ is the perfect example, meaning the practicality of the Quran. the practicality of the Quran is in the Prophet ﷺ. So because the Prophet ﷺ is the practical aspect of the Quran, it's important for us to understand Hadith. This is why Hadith is important, because it's giving us that practical aspect. And now understand, when the Prophet ﷺ, when he came and he gave this message, he didn't say, this is sunnah, which we use a lot. This is haram. Actually, he did use halal and haram, by the way. Those are probably the only two words that was used then and that are also used now. Right? But sunnah wasn't used. I mentioned sunnah mu'akkada. That wasn't used. They didn't have that word. Makruh, right? It could have been used, but maybe in a different way. But it wasn't a specific terminology for this and for that. So what happened was, and think about this, as if you are to raise a kid. So if you're raising a child from birth, you teach this child, don't touch fire. You teach them candy is okay, but not too good. Don't eat it all the time. You teach them don't touch the plug outlet, right? So on and so forth. There's just things that you teach this child, and he learns that, right? And then now when he learns it, how does he teach it to the next generation if they don't have a plug, or they don't have fire, or they don't have this, and they don't have that? How does he teach it to the next generation? He has to make up rules. Does that make sense? So that's what happened from the time of the Prophet ﷺ till later on. We have scholars that have been serving this religion to take what the Prophet ﷺ said, did, and approved of, and translate that into a way where we can understand it so that we can implement it in our lives. So therefore, things have kind of gotten more complicated, but at the same time, they've gotten to a way where we can understand it so we can implement it in our lives. So now, okay, you have a spectrum, haram, and then you have sunnah, which we call it, right? You have haram and you have sunnah. So then you have mubah, which is in the middle. Haram is something that you get punished for if you do it. Something you can get punished for if you do it. Sunnah, something you can get rewarded for if you do it. And then mubah, no reward, no punishment. Make sense? And then there's stuff in between, both of those. Then there's also severity of haram, severity of sunnah, right? So understand that we kind of got all of these rules based on the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. When I say the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, I'm talking about hadith. But nonetheless, the point is that I'm trying to make is that it's important to understand history to kind of understand all of that as well. So it's important to understand why we're talking about this, why we're doing this, and it goes back to, like, how do we worship Allah? That's pretty much the essence of all of it. Let's go to the next hadith. تفضل.
27? Yeah. Nusi bin Sami'an رضي الله عنه.
Say it again. عن النواس. النواس بن سمعان.
النواسي بن سمعان. بن سمعان رضي الله عنه. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
عليه الصلاة والسلام.
البر حسن الخلق والإثم ما حق في نفسك
ما حاك في نفسك وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. رواه مسلم. Okay, so and then there's more, right?
Yes. وعن أبي صعد بن معبدي
وابصة ابن معبد.
وعن وابصة
أبي وابصة ابن معبد.
وابصة بن وعن أبيسة
وعن وابصة ابن معبد.
وابصة معابد رضي الله عنه قال أتيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال جئت تسأل عن البر قلت
عن البر.
قلت نعم قال
استفتي
كلبك إبر ما أتمعنت
البر ما اطمأنت
إليه نفس واطمأن إليه القلب والإثم ما حق في نفسي
والإثم
ما هاك في نفسي وتردد في صدري وإن أفتك الناس
وأفتوك.
حديث حسن
رويناه
في مسند الإمام أحمد بن جنبل
ابن حنبل. والدارمي بإسناد حسن. So, who was the first rawi? عن النواس بن سمعان رضي الله عنه. So he narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, and as Imam nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi mentioned, البر حسن الخلق. So what is bir, first of all? Bir is goodness, or I can't think, what is it translated there as? Righteousness. Okay. Yeah, and I think it's more than that, because bir is referring to any good deed that can lead to righteousness. Any good deed that can lead to righteousness, or is righteous. Okay? So he said, that is, what is that? Good manners. That is good manners. So, good manners, there's another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says that the people that are closest to him on the Day of Judgment are the people with good manners. There's another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that a person can reach the level of a person who fasts all day and prays all night by his good manners. So someone who has good manners can reach the level of someone who fasts all day or all the time and prays all night all the time just by having good manners. Because, and the reason that is because the good deed that is, I don't know how to say muta'addi in English, that goes to someone else, a good deed that affects others, is more rewarding to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the good deed that only affects you. When I fast, it's just me. When I'm praying, it's just me. But when I'm nice to someone, when I'm kind to someone, when I lower myself to others, then that it's affecting others. That good deed that's affecting others is more virtuous to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the good deed is only affecting me. Okay? So the good deed that is affecting others is more virtuous than the good deed that is affecting just yourself. So therefore, good manners is goodness. That is what goodness is. Good manners. And another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Like the whole reason the Prophet ﷺ was sent was for good manners. Was to perfect good manners. Was to show us good manners. And how was the manners of the Prophet ﷺ? Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was asked, she said his manners were the Quran. Prophet ﷺ had the best manners. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, and just to show you the manners of the Prophet ﷺ, he never got mad for himself. Never. Whenever he got mad, it was for Islam and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But never for himself. There's a man who came to him and was like pulling his shirt, right? Violently. In that is bir. In that is goodness. That is the essence of goodness. Al-birru husnul khuluq. Wal-ithmu, and what is sin? So the opposite of bir is sin. Right? Al-ithm. وَالْإِثْمُ مَا حَاكَ فِي نَفْسِكَ. Is that right? في صدرك. وَالْإِثْمُ مَا حَاكَ فِي صدرك. And then what is sin? So في نفسك, the first one, right? Is it في نفسك وتردد في الصدر? Or is it just في نفسك?
في نفسك.
وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. Okay. So, and then he says sin is whatever doesn't feel right in your heart, or it hurts in your heart. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created us with something called al-fitra. And this fitra, some scholars say it is associated with where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He got all of us together, all of humanity, before we were born. And then He said, "Am I not your Lord?" And then we said, of course you are, Ya Allah, and we bear witness on ourselves. So they say our fitra, how do you say fitra in English? Like, I don't know how to...
Nature or inclination to the nature?
Our natural...
Inclination.
Yeah, good inclination.
Inclination.
Right. It's the good natural inclination, right? That good natural inclination, it never leaves us. Right? And one example of that, if you look at an alcohol bottle, it's never going to say alcohol. I don't think it does, right? I haven't looked at all of them. But I've looked at one before, or some. And they don't say alcohol. Right? Why? Because they don't want to say they're drinking alcohol. Because it doesn't feel right. Right, so they change the name to make themselves feel better. But I mean, it makes them feel better for a second, but then they also feel bad, right? And it's the same with every sin, and that's why alcohol is so important to them, because the alcohol drowns out all the other sins, makes them forget about all the other sins for a while. Like they have a period of time where it makes them forget, right? So, and that's the thing, is that you cannot suppress that fitrah. You can't. It continues within us, and that is basically what tells us that something is bad. Now understand, there are levels to bad, right? And therefore there are levels to your fitrah. Okay? There's major sins, right? So the kuffar, now when I say the kuffar, I'm being very broad, because obviously you have levels to the kuffar, right? But let's just assume all the kuffar are on the same level for a second here. The kuffar would feel that guiltiness in general for major sins. They don't feel it for minor sins. Why? Because they are far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then someone who is Muslim would feel that for minor sins. And then for major sins, it's just like, whoa. It's like much more. Does that make sense? And then, like, amazingly righteous people, they also feel messed up for something that takes them away from good. Not just a sin. If something is taking them away from something good, they feel messed up about it. They feel bad about it. They can't do it. Right? I've sat with scholars who the only thing that they do in their day is praying, remembering Allah, writing a book, teaching a class, and then even when they eat, they try to do something else because they don't want to waste their time with eating. Even when they use the bathroom, they try to use it as quick as possible so they don't waste their time using the bathroom. Akramakumullah. So the scholars, the most righteous people, their fitrah is telling them, don't waste your time in something that is not good. So there's levels to this. Sin is whatever hurts you inside. And this depends on your level, but in order for you to keep increasing, you have to see things that lead to sin bigger than they are, if that makes sense. So like, for myself, I should see not just drinking alcohol as bad, but being anywhere near it as bad. Being anywhere near anyone who is near it is bad. So on and so forth. You get what I'm saying? Because something is haram to you or something is bad to you, then therefore you are directly associating bad to everything around it, if that makes sense. Now, this is something that you do with yourself, because you have to understand there is haram, and then there is something called wara. Okay. Wara. I don't think we've talked about what wara is. Wara is a heart action. Okay? It's waw, ra, ayn. Wara. And wara is basically the concept of making something great that is great to Allah. Making something great to yourself that is great to Allah. What does that mean? For example, salah is important to me. So therefore, as soon as it comes in, I pray. Right? I won't wait 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Pray as soon as it comes in. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about myself. This is a person that I'm making up. So salah is important to me, so therefore I pray as soon as it comes in. Salah is important to me, therefore I make sure I take my time when I do it. Salah is important to me, so therefore I do all the sunnahs that are around salah. Salah is important to me, so therefore, like, I wake everybody up in my family when it's time. Salah is, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Right? So the more important salah is to someone, the more they make a big deal about it. Right? Or salah is important to me, so I pray every single one in the masjid. Salah, the list goes on, right? So this is wara because I am trying to, because I know salah is important to Allah, so I make it something extremely important to me. Right? So this is the same thing with haram. Basically, wara is done for haram though. And I used salah as an example, but wara is used for haram. Or that term is used for things that are haram. So now let's look at alcohol, for example. Right? Alcohol, or let's use pork. So I hate pork because it's haram to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So therefore, anything that comes near to pork, I'm running away. Anything that gets the smell of pork, I'm running away. Right? Any place that sells pork, within that place, I'm running away. Now, mind you, I'm not saying these things are haram. But what I'm saying is I'm making it haram for me. Right? This is called wara. When I am making something a bigger deal than it has to be, I'm making it a bigger deal to me, that's called wara. Okay? So understand that the more wara that I have, the more these little things will hurt me in my heart. Little things that that may not be necessarily haram. And I'll give you an example of that. So on the Day of Judgment, people are going to go to Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and say, Ibrahim, help us, because this is a big day. We're scared. Allah is going to bring His wrath upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from His wrath. And they're going to say, help us. He's going to say, I sinned. Mind you, this is a prophet. Prophets don't sin. What was his sin? Is that he lied, but for Allah's benefit. Like he was, no, excuse me, let me not say that. He lied for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wanted to lie for Allah about the idols. Right? So he said, I can't intercede on your behalf. I'm scared. This is a prophet. Right? So he had wara to the point, and this wasn't something haram, because he had a good reason to lie. Right? Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. They go to him and they say, Ya Musa, help us. And he said, I killed somebody. But Allah says in the Quran, and Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he knows about the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, فَغْفِرْ لِي فَغَفَرَ لَهُ. Allah forgave him. But even though Allah forgave him, he is still, like, it's driving him crazy that deed that he did. That he accidentally killed someone. He killed him by accident, not on purpose. Right? And then Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, they go to him and they say, Ya Isa, help us, help us, help us. And he says, I can't. But then they say, the narrator says that, and he doesn't remember that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned a sin. But he just said, I can't. So then they go to the Prophet ﷺ. And this, the point that I'm mentioning this, so they go to the Prophet ﷺ and the Prophet ﷺ intercedes. Right? The reason that I'm mentioning this is to show you the wara of prophets. That they saw things that may not have been sins. To them they were sins. because they feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much. Right? And you know, a person who fears someone, like if a person, for example, fears his father, when he comes around, he's not gonna move at all. So if we truly feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's no example to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but if we truly feared what the hellfire has, we truly feared the day of judgment, we truly fear what the punishment of the grave has, if we truly feared these things, then we wouldn't look at any sin that we have with a small look. We would look at it as if it's the worst thing ever. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. So wara' is important because and this natural thing that we have, it gives you that feeling that this sin is bad, that this thing is bad. So therefore, we have to listen to that. When we feel something is bad, don't do it. وَالْإِثْمُ مَا حَاكَ فِي نَفْسِكَ, and then what's حَاكَ فِي نَفْسِكَ وَكَرِهْتَ أَنْ يَطَّلِعَ عَلَيْهِ النَّاسِ. And that's the other thing, is that you don't want people to see you doing it. So this also tells you, this is in the absence of, is this haram or is it halal? Yeah, if you don't want people to see you doing it, it's haram. Right? This is an ithm. And then وعن وابصة بن معبد رضي الله عنه, he said that he came to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, and the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, جئت تسأل عن البر. Right? And this is just a sign of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام that he would receive revelation sometimes on small things. Right? But the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام was constantly getting revelation. Right? So he said, yes, I came to ask about bir. So he said, istafti qalbak, ask your heart. Ask your heart, and your heart will tell you what is wrong and what is right. البر ما اطمأنت إليه النفس. Bir is whatever yourself feels content with. Whatever yourself feels good with it. Right? And this is that fitrah that again, this fitrah, we can either feed it in the wrong direction or the right direction. Because if we are constantly doing wrong things, then that fitrah minimizes sins. So therefore, the big sins seem to be wrong, but not that bad. Right? And that's sort of where society is going today, where like alhamdulillah, killing is still seen to be something big. Right? Alhamdulillah, that's a good thing. But that's like the red line. And it seems like anything else is okay. Right? In this society, I mean, there's a lot of things that are considered okay now. Right? And they're considered okay because they are pushing their fitrah to the limit. They're pushing their fitrah too far, the wrong way. So therefore, they still feel bad about things, but not about everything. Okay? But what we have to do is be pushing our fitrah to the right way, to do as much good as we possibly can, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is blessing us where, when you eat good food and you eat nutritious food, I don't know how to say that, you eat that all the time. When it comes to eating garbage, you're like, eh. But if you eat garbage all the time, you eat good food, the good food tastes bad. Right? And it's sort of the same type of thing when it comes to your fitrah. If you're constantly getting good, you're constantly going in the good direction, that bad direction, it feels bad. Right? But when you're constantly going in that bad direction, you're becoming desensitized. So then the bad that was here, now it's here. Then it becomes here. Then it becomes here. So your bad threshold is becoming higher and higher. You get what I'm saying? So the feel bad that person has, it happens, but not as often. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. So it's important that we try to keep our hearts clean, so therefore we feel bad for bad, and then we feel good with good. So whatever yourself tells you is good, اطمأنت إليه النفس واطمأن إليه القلب, and your heart feels good with it. والإثم ما حاك في النفس, whatever hurts you inside of you. وإن أفتاك الناس وأفتوك. It doesn't matter how many times people come to you and they say, oh yeah, this is halal. Right? It seems like it's like everybody says it's halal, but it just doesn't feel right. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay? Any questions about that? All right. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وإياكم.